This whole course really is tailored towards non-designers. So no matter what your level of experience or expertise is when it comes to this kind of stuff, hopefully there's some stuff that you can take away from it. So without further ado, I will quickly introduce myself. I'm Taylor. I'm a designer, a creative entrepreneur. I've been working for the last decade in corporate organizations and creative agencies, everything from branding and identity design to web and packaging and print and product design. So a little bit of everything under the sun, but now as kind of a creative entrepreneur, co-founder of The Sauce, and content creator in my own right, I am here to kind of share that process, those strategies and tactics with all of you in a way that makes sense, that isn't all bubbled up in corporate jargon and that kind of stuff. So apologies about that. Let's get into it. I mentioned that this is part of a course, and this is what the entire overview of all of these modules looks like. And today I'm going to be covering module 4, which I think is probably the most valuable and single-handedly most impactful module from this entire course. The rest of these really tie into it and kind of bring it all together nicely so that you have a really comprehensive view of what needs to happen in order to take your visual branding to the next level, even as a non-designer. So I'm not going to cover all these other modules today, but I did just want to show you guys, like, this is what else is in this course. And this is what I'm going to be talking about today, is building a visual brand identity. So, let's go. I hope you guys can see my screen okay. I'm dual tasking with multiple monitors. And if I have any audio issues or anything like that, feel free to use the comments if you're watching on YouTube. I think we're also live streaming on Twitter. So feel free to chime in, ask questions, add your comments, whatever you want to do. And I will try to get to those as I can. Hey, Maritza. Hey, Food Fight. What's up? Hey, Chris. How's it going? Agency Performance Partners. How's it going, you guys? Excited that you're all here. I just introduced myself, and we're going to get into this module all around building a visual brand identity. I'm going to show you my exact framework, my exact step-by-step process. And like I said, this has been a labor of love. So I'm really excited that we're here today doing this. And finally, this is the first time I'm doing it in front of a live audience. So thank you guys all for being here. And I did want to add too, if you're watching on YouTube, over in the description, you can actually snag the full download for this PDF that I'm going to go through with all of the different pages and sections. There's some like templates and sort of like, I don't know, workshop or exercises towards the end. Those will definitely be really handy and helpful. So check that out. You can click the link in the description on YouTube to get access to that. But we're going to go forward, guys. Let's do it. So starting with clearing the air. What is visual branding, right? This is like a big topic. You hear it thrown around all the time on different social channels. Everyone's talking about, oh, you need to have your branding or you need to have your design. But like, what does that actually mean? So visual branding, if we're distilling it down into some of the basic themes that it all kind of captures, is a couple different things. This is not an exhaustive list, by the way, but if we had to boil it down to like 4 groupings, 4 areas, I would say it's about your logo, it's about your color, it's about your typography, and it's about your imagery. It's about using design and creating kind of a unique identity with all of these elements together that visually communicates who you are, what you do, what you stand for, what your brand is all about. And that's what creates a visual impact for your audiences. And sorry, guys, I'm having, I have a little bit of a cough that I'm getting over. So when you think about a visual brand, right, you're probably thinking about, well, when you think about any brand, like I want you to picture, you know, one of your favorite consumer brands that come to your mind, something that you use every day, maybe a travel brand that you love. You're probably going to think of things like their logo, their website, what colors they use, their packaging, their social media assets, all of these. That's a perfect example of how all of these elements sort of work together to create this true visual representation of your brand. So I have an example here that I want to show you, and it's one that I'm sure all of us recognize, but it's Coca-Cola. So if we think of a well-known brand like Coca-Cola, you've got the classic like red and white color scheme. Well, this is only the red, but I'll show you on the next slide. You've got that red color scheme, the iconic script. You have this sort of dynamic wave. All of this imagery really comes together to create this visual identity that is like instantly recognizable, right? So these elements communicate personality, values, promise, um, and not only that, but like you could probably only see half of this logo or even a quarter of it, and you would know instantly what it is. And that is the power of having an emotional connection as well that goes beyond the product. In this example, you can kind of see how all of these elements come together to create something that's like instantly recognizable, right? So, regardless of the product, the location, the setting that it's in, who's using it, or the brand partners that might be working with them, you know right off the bat instantly, this is Coca Cola. And that's the power, again, of visual branding. So, what are all of these touch points then when we talk about visual branding? What does that go into? Like, where does that actually matter when it comes to design, especially? Good morning, Nadia, Linda Ray. Hey, how's it going? Inky Punk. What's up, Rick? You're here. All right, so back to the slide. So we're talking about visual branding touch points, right? This isn't an exhaustive, this is not an exhaustive list. But again, my goal for this is to make it as simple and boiled down as possible. So I could probably wax poetic all day about just these different brand touch points. But what I'm going to say is if we had to put it in a couple buckets, I would say that you have your channel branding, which is things like your website, your social content, and your chat, like your actual marketing channels, things like your banner, your profile pic, your newsletter graphics, any sort of like press or PR that you might have, as well as like some offline stuff. Think like business cards, if people still use those. If you're going to like an expo or a show, have like with print materials, things like that could probably all be categorized under like channel branding as it's a marketing channel, and that's what that's for. And then the other middle category is content. This is stuff that, you're putting out and you're publishing regularly as part of your brand. So things like infographics or even like social media graphics that you're publishing, ebooks, guides, presentations, videos, even pitch decks for clients and things like that. On the promo side of things, this is, advertising. So you're putting display ads out, or you're making a meta ad, you're promoting an event, and so maybe you want like a thumbnail for that, or even like your video content, and how you collaborate with other people. That visual branding carries through on the visuals for that promo content with collabs. So it's kind of helpful to see how your brand really touches like every area of your business. And a lot of people think, oh well, design, that's just like something that's expensive and I don't really need, or I can't really like bring it into the fold yet. But it is, especially with this slide here, it kind of shows you how design touches every component, every piece of the puzzle that makes up your brand, from the channels that you market to your website to how your content is published and perceived by the public. These are all of the touch points. Ultimately, right, your brand identity communicates your values, personality. It creates a sense of visual recognition. Remember that Coca-Cola example we just went through? It establishes trustworthiness and credibility while creating all along this memorable, recognizable visual cue for your audiences. So that is just to clear the air of what visual branding is. All boiled down, it's basically just your visual message to the world. It's your unified design message to the world. And it matters, especially when you can create it in an impactful and cohesive way that aligns with your brand values, your brand messaging, your ethos of who you are and what you want to present to the world. All of this ties together to kind of create this visual brand. Something that I'm very passionate about. I love talking about, so I'm sure I could go on and on for that. But I'm going to actually go into the process now, give you a little bit of a download on what I do to develop and build visual brands. There are several schools of thought around design thinking. If you ask any designer, I'm sure most designers will have like a different process. And even non-designers as well have their own creative process. There's design thinking, there's like traditional iterative design. But I'm going to show you all of these aside. I'm going to just show you my exact process that I go through, that I use for clients, brands, entrepreneurs, startups, across the board. This can kind of be scaled and flexed to whatever the project at hand is. This is my process, my four-step process, we'll call it. And again, this can be expanded upon or even truncated down to be even simpler, depending on what kind of a brand that you're building. But this is kind of where I start with clients. This process offers a structured, efficient approach to kind of crafting something cohesive and impactful. It nails all of the key points. Of course, if you were to ask like an agency designer, they would tell you that this has actually 20 steps in it, and they're probably right. But for the sake of making it simple and easy to understand, this is kind of how I approach it. It's four steps. It's the collect, where you're getting your information, you're bringing it all together, you're making sense of it, and then you're moving into like the brainstorm. Okay, now that we have the information, let's start to parse it out. Let's build a mood board. Let's identify what we like and don't like about the brand that we're building, or the visual preferences about the brand that we're building. And then let's also talk, you know, after the brainstorming step, we'll get into design. So, designing the logo, creating your style guide, which helps to make sure that your designs can be scaled and replicated across different touch points as well, and by non-designers and other designers that might be in your wheelhouse. And then the fourth step is the brand part. This is where you're actually applying your branding, your visual style guide to your brand assets, things like your channel branding, your graphics, your promo materials, your published content, everything that you're putting out has sort of that visual brand mark on it. And then, of course, with that step, always is the feedback and iterating as well towards the end of that. Um, Design is never a straight and arrow line, especially when it comes to visual branding. So I think that it's important to keep in mind, like this is a very flexible, malleable sort of process, and it's never going to be perfect the first time around. There's always room for improving it, measuring it, seeing what's working and what's not, and then making little tweaks as you go. So, I'm gonna go through each of these steps. If you guys have questions, feel free to throw them in on the chat. I think we're streaming on YouTube and we're also on Twitter. So thank you guys for being here and being part of this. Hopefully, I can answer some questions at the end if you guys have some that to put in, but I'm gonna get into the actual process, the step by step. So step one, this is collecting, right? This is where I mentioned you're getting all of your stuff together under one roof. You're putting it somewhere that you can easily access it and it makes sense. So, part of what goes into this step is having like a true heart to heart with yourself, or if you're working on a client and you're helping develop their visual brand, like what is it about this product or service that makes it different? What kind of activities does this brand engage in? What are the marketing channels? These are all the details that you need to define at the onset before you even get into, kind of curating and collecting a visual vibe, so to speak. And so it's great to put it all in one place. I love using Notion. I love using Google Docs for this. Canva is also great. I actually designed this entire presentation in Canva. I'm a huge advocate of Canva, despite having all the experience on all of the other pro platforms. Canva is the place to be. So put all of that in one spot. And one of the tactics, or I guess kind of frameworks that you can use that I love using, is what's called a business model canvas. And again, you can download this whole deck if you want. It's in the description on YouTube, so that you can actually use this and play around with it a little bit. But I love the business model canvas sort of framework and approach, because it's almost like a mini business plan. You don't have to spend, days and weeks going through and building out a full business plan just to get things started from like a visual branding point of view. This really just gives you like the bird's eye view of everything happening around this brand that you're building. And it's especially helpful for creators, entrepreneurs, founders, small businesses, startups that just don't have the time and the resources to build out something, really high scale, and like nobody has time to build a 20-page. Uh, oh, thank you. Nobody has time to build like a 20-page business model document until, sorry, I had a little bit of an interruption. So this is great for that, because it, like, again, you can define your niche, your personality, mission, vision, values, and kind of see it all in one spot. And it sort of clarifies some of that information too, so that when you go into the actual visual branding exercise part of this thing, you have everything that you need in one spot. Linda Ray says, I'm addicted to Canva. I totally agree. I can't stop and I won't stop. um, so definitely check this out. A lot of different ways to slice and dice this, from actually having a full-on business plan. Again, this is just sort of the condensed, quickest path to victory. Thank you, John, for that one. Approach that I like to take. So with this, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to want to be thinking about, identifying, and trying to synthesize to bring together, especially around like your brand's personality and values, right? These are like human characteristics of your brand. These are the things that if you were describing your business as a person, like what would they be like? What would their purpose, what would their interests be? What would their vibe be for when they're explaining things, or when they're talking to other people? What is the vision? So right here, I kind of just have a couple different keywords, and I'm going to show you. I have an example that I've put together on one of these later slides that kind of ties back to this. So keep in mind, it's always best to just start writing stuff down. You can always pare it back later, but this is always how I start my branding exercises with clients, with myself, with others, is like, let's just put it all into a pot, pare it down, synthesize it a little bit, try to understand what these keywords, what we're trying to explain, and what we want to be perceived as to the public. I have some brand personality exercises in here as well. We've done like a whole, identifying your brand personality and like your values and your vision. I'm not going to go too deep into it here, but just know that this is in the deck. So this is just another way to kind of think about who your brand is, defining their values, the characteristics, the little traits and distinctive features that sort of define who you are. And then the things that your brand does and does not. I like this one a lot because it creates a very clear distinction between, who you really want to embody and the traits and characteristics that you don't want associated with your brand. So it's a great way to think about that. Again, you can download this whole deck as well, so you can access this and use it for yourself if you'd like. Um, but continuing on this step of like collecting, right? So by the end of this step, again, this is the first step of just getting your bearings and putting it all under one roof. By the end of this step, you should be able to identify three key areas: the brand positioning, and this includes, unique selling proposition, your USP. For those acronym savvy folks out there, it's basically what sets you apart. You want to know who your target audience is, who you're trying to message to, what you're offering, like what are the key benefits, what sets you apart. And then on the brand value side of things, what are the principles that sort of guide your business, define your brand, the values, and how do you want to have those interactions with people? How are you showcasing what your values are? What differentiates you as well as part of brand values? And then on the brand voice side, this is the fun one. This is like voice and tone words. What is your language? How do you message to people? How do you engage with people as well? Is it through storytelling? Is it through humor? Is it through empathy? And then also on the brand voice side, it's great to also include, some of the key messaging, taglines, slogans, anything like that that you might have kind of created or brainstormed in this process. So I'll show you kind of an example, right? And this is just, again, to explain this very simply, this is an example, which, by the way, this is a completely made up example. I'm a huge advocate and fan of AI tools. So with the help of ChatGPT, um, and a couple other AI tools, I was able to sort of create this like brand persona, right? And I think that this is pretty on par for some of the clients that I've worked with, as well as hopefully some of you that are watching this. It's sort of within the same niche, in the same vein. But let's take this example of like a podcasting pioneer, right? So let's call it Pod Future Academy. I asked ChatGPT for some names, and this was one of the ones that came back with, and I was like, that actually could probably be a person that I would follow on Twitter. So we're going to call them Pod Future Academy. Pod Future Academy is a one-man show, and this person wants to share their coaching wisdom around podcasting for content creators. They wanna help other creators, they wanna help other podcasts, get seen, get visibility, they wanna share best practices and their wisdom, right? So how do they do this? So going back to this original framework, if you recall, the brand positioning, brand values, and brand voice, I've outlined just a couple bullet points for under these. I'm not gonna go through each of them. You can always download this and check it out, but you kinda have an idea of what this would look like in application for an actual brand, well, for a fake brand. But what it might look like for an example around positioning, values, and voice. And we're gonna come back to this example a few times as well, so I'll show you kind of how we iterate on it throughout this process. So, back to the big steps of visual branding. Step 2 is brainstorming. This is, easily my favorite part of the process. I mean yeah, I think that this is my favorite part of the process. This is where you can really get into it, the creative exploration. You start to, like, list your likes and dislikes, the preferences, what is the visual vibe that you're going for, and you get to build a mood board. So in this step, again, likes, dislikes, start a swipe folder. If you don't know what a swipe folder is, that's basically a folder of stuff that you save that you really like, whether it's from other people creating it, other brands creating it, stuff that speaks to you, and tells you, okay, like this is definitely something that I could emulate in some way, or this is inspiring to me. Just think of it like an inspo file. If you're on Pinterest, maybe think of it as a pinned board. I have a lot of those for design. And then the third part of the brainstorming step is creating a mood board. And a mood board is really just a representation of your personalities, your brand's personalities, values, and importantly, aesthetics. This includes stuff like textures and colors, images, other design elements, and it kind of helps to guide the design process. This is the first time where you're actually going to put pen to paper or cursor to computer screen to actually put the visuals together that you think encapsulates, the values and the personality of your brand. So here's that example from Pod Future Academy, our made up, example of this podcasting coach, right? So, as an example of this, of like the visual vibe, the likes and the dislikes, if we think about it that way. Maybe it's we love vibrant, futuristic colors, modern, clean typography, minimalist icons, and this is all aligned back to, what that overall look at the brand persona, this all aligns back to that brand persona. So it's like the minimalism, the bold, the futurism, the contrast, the geometry and symmetry. Things that would not fit that visual vibe is stuff like muted, neutral color palettes, organic, flowy, asymmetric shapes and lines, maybe like handwriting script font. Because we went through that first step where we were collecting all the information and synthesizing it, we know that those probably aren't things that would align well to the message and the overall personality of this brand. So those are kind of like that's our negative context for this. Um, so then if we continue through the brainstorming process, I think it's really important to understand first off what a mood board is and why it exists. I kind of explained what it is, but know why you're creating something like this before you just start pulling stuff. I've seen so many designers just start going into, a literal like, rabbit hole down the internet of finding content and designs and inspiration, and it's so easy to get overwhelmed and sidetracked, and then just start putting stuff on a slide and then calling it a mood board. You need to understand that having a mood board is actually there to inform the creative process throughout the rest of it. Not only does it act as sort of a reference point for you as a designer or non-designer just trying to figure this out, but it also helps other people who might be collaborating with you, maybe some team members that you have, kind of understand the not only visual look, but sort of the feel as well that you're going for. Some tips for creating a good solid mood board. I always start with keywords. So of course that seems like a given, but look for the things that, the textures, the colors. If we go back on like the likes and dislikes, maybe it's as simple as vibrant futuristic color scheme, vibrant futuristic color scheme that you could use as keywords as you're searching. And look also beyond just digital design. It's easy to get caught in this trap of, scrolling through uh, design inspiration on like Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, Dribbble, any of these, like, Behance even, any of these platforms where it's just like visual overload and sensory overload, it's very easy to get caught in that. So it's helpful to kind of look outside of digital design as well and see what themes or principles you can kind of carry through. Maybe you're flipping through like an old-fashioned magazine, or you see something even on like a TV screen, um, or just a billboard in your neighborhood or something like that. So keep in mind those things when you're in this process to keep your brain open to different funnels, different openings of inspiration, not just contained to what you're gonna find online. This is why I need someone to do this for me. Yes. Yes, Michelle. It is a process, let me tell you, and Linda, it is quite a process, but it's fun. This is my favorite part of the process. All right, so I'm gonna keep going through. I'm gonna show you a mood board example of Hot Future Academy. So this mood board I actually generated using Midjourney V5, and I would normally curate and collect all these different pieces for a mood board on my own, but I wanted to do this twofold. 2 reasons why I did this. One, because it was super efficient and I didn't have time to collect a full mood board and put all the pieces together. It is a time-consuming process, especially when you get into that, like, really creative exploration and research mode. Um, but the second part is I wanted to show you that it is possible to literally create a mood board using AI image generation. And this was great because I was able to actually just going back to that slide of like what the brand persona is, I was able to take some of that, plug it into ChatGPT, and ask it for a description of what a mood board for this visual brand might look like. And then I edited that down a little bit, and came back with this. So I wouldn't say that this is absolute best practice, but when you're in a pinch and you really need some inspiration, definitely think about, making your life a little bit easier by leveraging tools like AI because that's what it's here for. And as you can see, it actually did quite a nice job. This probably isn't something I would present to like a client in this state, but it is definitely something that gets the ball rolling and starts to get me to think around what color palettes, textures, look and feel, the imagery, all of those different things. So that is the mood board example. All right, we're gonna get into the design phase. This is where it gets even more fun. This is where you kind of get out of the brainstorming and you get a little bit more comfortable with putting cursor to screen and actually moving pixels around or collecting other graphics or vectors in order to make it into, this fully fleshed out vision. So this is the phase where you actually start designing logo concepts and putting a style guide together based on all of the persona and positioning that we went through in the collection stage to the brainstorming and what that all sort of look at. This is like the third stage, if we're moving through it sort of linearly of, okay, we've done those 2 things. Let's actually do it. Let's actually execute it. So that's what this is. The logo stuff is fun. One of the myths that, I think I hear quite often, I don't know if it's a myth or just a statement that I hear quite often is like, "Oh, all I need is a logo," right? "All I need is a logo for my design." And logos are, of course, a huge part of your brand. It's a critical part of your brand, but it's definitely not the only key piece of what defines your brand. So I think it's important to think about that. While the logo is a big part of it, it's not the only thing. And you could have the most simple, minimalist logo in the world and still have pretty kick-ass branding and it all ties together. So don't get all beat up around, oh, I need to find the perfect logo. I need to create the perfect logo. Remember when I mentioned that design is an iterative process? The same goes for logos and all of the other visual branding elements that go into this. So on the logo front, though, a couple things that I'll say is the logo is obviously a visual representation of your brand, right? It should reflect your brand's personality, your brand's values. And, you can always start by brainstorming ideas and like sketching out some rough ideas or rough designs. Maybe even in your mood board section, this is where you can add some of those concepts to that as you're kind of building it and refining it. But as you'll go through the process, you'll be able to start to sort of like refine it. And even if you're not the one designing, understanding all of these different facets that go into creating a visual brand, I think really empowers all of us, especially non-designers, to be able to communicate like really clearly and impactfully with a potential designer that you are working with. So that's kind of why, we're going into this. You might be thinking, I'm not a logo designer. I would never do this. I don't know the first thing. It's okay. As long as you understand some of these core principles and the foundational elements of it, you can better position then to be able to communicate it to somebody who will design it for you. Or if you're just like really ballsy and want to try and take it for a spin, go for it. You can play around with it. So these are the basics of a logo. Is I use the Adidas logo as sort of a reference point because it has all of these key components to it that we're gonna outline. So there's something called the icon or the brand mark, and that's this top section up here. That could stand alone, and it often does with brands. Think about like, the McDonald's arches or the Target circle. That's like the icon. That's the brand mark. It could stand alone and still be recognizable. And then there's the logo type or the word mark, and that's just the piece that kind of underlines it all. That is the literal logo type because it contains the typography. And it could stand alone on its own. Oftentimes you do, especially you see it as like an individual asset on things like marketing materials, promo materials, especially when there's not enough real estate on the page to have what is called a full logo lockup. And that's when all of the pieces of the logo are there together. So it's important also to recognize that, like, you don't need all of these parts to have a logo. Some people just have a logo type or word mark. Some people just have the icon or the brand mark, and some brands have the entire package. It just depends on what works for you. Um, but it's definitely important to, when you're creating this, go back to the drawing board that we came up with in step 1 and step 2 with collecting information and brainstorming, because you do wanna make sure that you're creating something that aligns with your brand's personality, your values, your positioning in the market as well. So let's go back to that example of Pod Future Academy. This was a quick mock-up of what a potential logo exploration could look like, right? So we started with this, we look at it sort of like as a progression. Started with just this like basic handwriting Pod Future Academy. And then I was playing around with like, a little bit more like display and sort of headline fonts. And then, oh, what would it look like if it was stacked? And then I was able to kind of create this like icon mark, if we're going back, icon or brand mark, and sort of have the full lockup. So this was just a quick exploration that I did to sort of show how the evolution of a logo can take shape and how it can align with that persona and the brand positioning overall. So then step 3, as part of the design of step 3, we talked about logo, we're gonna talk about style. I love style guides. I feel like they're everywhere. They're really easy to create because there are so many templates. I shouldn't say they're easy to create because they're definitely not. They take time and they take effort, but they're really fun to create, and they're easy to get references and resources and support on because they are such a ubiquitous part of marketing and branding, and it's not hard to find kind of a starting point for something like this, even if it's just a template. But typically, a style guide is going to be a book, a PDF usually, of just rules and guidelines for your brand's visuals. It doesn't always even have to be like a full book. It could just be like a one-sheeter page that says, here's the color palettes, typography, imagery, and other design elements that we use. This helps to maintain visual consistency. It also makes it a lot easier to design on brand visuals across the board, whether it's you doing it yourself or whether it's you having somebody on your team doing it, or whether it's you hiring a freelancer to help you do it. The style guide is sort of the rule book, the playbook, if you will, for having yourself and anyone else who's touching the visuals of your brand understand what goes into it and what it needs to look like. Um, So with a style guide, there's a couple things that are typically included in this. And again, this is kind of like a choose your own adventure situation because you don't need every single one of these. This is sort of the high level view of what you see a lot of times in style guides for brands, but these might not apply to you. Not all of them might not apply to you. So kind of pick and choose what works and what doesn't. But usually you want to include something like a quick introduction. What is this about? Maybe some background on your brand, your business story, some of those voice and tone words that we talked about earlier. Those are a great way to communicate the vibe and the feel of your business. Some rules around logo usage because you don't want somebody slapping your logo on a poorly contrasting background. And again, for smaller creators and coaches, entrepreneurs, founders, that might not be necessary to have a full logo usage page or section in this style guide, but it's definitely handy just to kind of show at a quick glance how you should and should not use the logo. Also, things like color palette, typography selection, imagery, how it can be applied to branding assets, any legal requirements. Usually, again, that probably won't apply to most of us, but if you are, starting up or building a visual style guide for a larger business, then it might be worth exploring if there's any legal requirements, things like trademark or copyright as well. Um, yeah. So step 4, guys. Gonna take a second just to catch up on the comments really quick. Thank you so much, Linda Ray. If you're not following this off on YouTube, now's the time. Yes, please subscribe to us on YouTube. We've kind of had a slow roll getting into YouTube over the last few months, but we're definitely creating content for it regularly. We upload our podcast there every week as well, and got some other little tidbits of information and videos, kind of like this one, that make their appearances on our YouTube channel. So thank you for that, Linda. Um, any questions that you guys have? Hey, Justine, any questions that you guys have, feel free to throw them in because we're almost through this. And I want to happily answer any questions towards the end, but we're going to go through the last section of this, which is the brand part. This is the section where this is the step where you're actually applying your designs, your branding, your visual branding approach to your brand assets. Um, and this is also the stage where you're getting feedback and you're iterating. Remember, nothing ever happens overnight. It's not just going to be a one and done design situation. There's always evolution involved with your visual design, especially when it comes to your business. So what does that look like? Well, for this step, for the branding, there's kind of, if you recall from earlier, there were those 3 sections that we talked about, the different brand touch points. And so we're going to revisit that here for a second. You have, and again, this list isn't exhaustive, but it does cover a lot of these like essential assets. You could consider this almost like a checklist. Like what is the website branding look like? What does the social media graphics look like? Especially if you're somebody who posts, to like Instagram or somewhere that's like a highly visual platform and you need a certain aesthetic or style for your graphics. This is the checklist for that. Things like newsletter, press, offline content, all of your published content that you're putting out regularly for your audiences, as well as that promo stuff. So these are the assets that you will be applying your brand styling to. And some design tips. I got a couple design tips for you guys. So creating templates is huge, of course. I feel like most of us know that, but it's worth reiterating. You can save a ton of time and effort by just having pre-made either templates that you create yourself and then just reuse each time, or checking out some of the pre-made templates from resources like Canva has a ton of them. Envato Creative Market is awesome. And there's a ton of other, I think like Figma has a bunch. There's a ton of different platforms where you can kind of take templates and then just stylize it to fit within your brand style, your visual approach, if you will. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is design specs for each social platform. This is always a tricky one because you could have the most beautiful visual branding in the world, but if you're not applying it according to design specs and best practices for some of your content channels like YouTube or Twitter, then it might totally miss the mark So definitely pay attention. You can access all of those specs, things like sizing, aspect ratios, file type, even call to actions. Like for example, YouTube banners allows you to include like call to actions down in the bottom right of your banner, your channel banner. So stuff like that is worth paying attention to. Each platform has its own set of specifications. You can find those usually on the site. There's usually like a specs or a design, a creative content section on these sites. So happy to link some of those out as well after this. But the third tip is Linda, thank you. It's inspiring. Yes. That's what I hope this is for. Um, I love this kind of stuff, so I'm glad that it's inspiring you. So the third tip that I have is taking advantage of design resources. You guys, there are so many free and paid design resources out there, and I have a list of them. I have actually 2 lists of them. One specifically just for AI, so that's another reason why you should download this deck because it's like a great little punch list if you ever need to refer back to it. But some of the resources and tools that I use, kinda just like broken down and categorized, free and low cost stuff. Canva, of course. I swear to God, this is not sponsored by Canva, although I wouldn't mind if Canva reached out to me. So Canva is amazing. You can do so much with it, and they recently released a massive suite of new AI capabilities and tools within its platform. So it just kind of makes the entire process so much easier and quick. Not much of a learning curve either. Canva is very intuitive, tons and tons of templates and graphic assets as well. Their graphics library is one of the best that I've ever seen, especially if you're subscribed to Pro. I think it's $12 a month is what I pay, and you get access to just like unlimited graphics, and you can export them in different formats too, you guys. So you can export as PDFs, as slides, or as like PNGs, like transparent graphics with a transparent background. You can also do GIFs with Canva, and you can even export in SVG format, which is a scalable vector graphic. I think that's what it stands for. SVG. So that's just if you need like the vector version of it. So definitely recommend Canva. That's at the top of my list. And mind you, this is coming from somebody who has like massive experience with all of Adobe's creative suite of tools, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. I still use those. Like, don't get me wrong, I still use those. I just don't use them as often because some of these free and low cost tools that are just available to me at the drop of a hat just make the process so much more efficient when I don't want to start up my Photoshop or my Illustrator and go through the whole process of feeling like my computer is gonna like take off from a helicopter launch pad because that's some of these like bigger platforms, these pro platforms are very intensive in like your CPU. So that's another reason why I just like some of these. But definitely check out some of the resources and tools from this list. Envato is another one that I love using. I pay a monthly subscription. I think it's like $20 for that, and I get unlimited access to all of their stock media. It's icons, it's stock audio, stock video, it's presentations, it's UX UI kits, it's logo packs, it's everything that you could ever imagine of like stock assets for a brand that you could then take those once you download them. You could take them and customize them if you want. There's a couple other, really great ones. Unsplash is amazing for stock imagery, Pexels as well. Google Fonts is all open source, available for use fonts, and Google Fonts has a massive library as well. So you can check that out. You can actually download full font families from there as well. Font Squirrel is another really good one with tons of free fonts. Figma is fantastic for UX UI design, wireframing, and they have a really great free base model. Webflow, a no-code website builder tool, is awesome as well. That one is a little bit more, I would say you need a little bit more experience to play around with Webflow, but if you're looking to build a website and you don't want to mess around with like WordPress and like doing your own custom thing, Webflow is a really great place to start as well. Procreate, that is one of my favorites. I use it on my iPad. You can illustrate. It's like $20 a month through the App Store, but very simple, user-friendly way to just like illustrate and draw stuff. On the paid side, I kind of went through some of these, but this is like the more pro versions of some of these apps and tools that you'll find. Some industry standards, of course, the Adobe Creative Suite, Premiere for video editing, After Effects for motion graphics, Blender for 3D modeling. Um, Again, this is probably more for, like, the advanced side. I would definitely take a look at these free and low-cost tools. They're some of my favorites, and I hope that they're some of your favorites too. On this next slide, we've got AI tools. This is a whole massive list. I couldn't narrow it down to just, like, one section, so I decided to just give a whole bunch of them that I use. And some of these I'm sure that you guys probably know already, but it's worth checking this list out and saving it if you need to, screenshotting it, whatever. But you have your text generation tools, which is like ChatGPT, Bing, Notion even. On the text enhancement side, you've got Grammarly that just helps make sure that you're sounding, your brand messaging is, like, buttoned up. Hemingway is a really great one as well. Of course, for image generation, I already talked about Midjourney, which is awesome. Dolly is another really great one. Even Canva AI has their own, in Canva, you can use the AI tools to do image generation there as well. Um, on the content creation side, Jasper, love Jasper, which is also a text generation tool. We've been using it for a while now. Before it was even called Jasper, it used to be called Jarvis. Copy AI is a good one. Text Cortex is awesome. There's SEO tools as well to kind of help with that, research tools. Oh, and then the video editing side, I did wanna do a call out to Descript, which is awesome because you can run your video content through that and it'll remove, like, any filler words. Wise Cuts is also great on the presentation side. Synthesia is awesome. It's like an all-in-one presentation video presentation maker. Tome is another one that's on there as well. All around, like, this is a great 11 Labs, which if you're in our Discord, you were playing around with that, all night last night, and you can actually clone voices. So all in all, lots of AI tools that are popping up. This list is, far from complete, but these are just some of the ones that I've identified I use regularly. This definitely help make my design and content creation process a lot easier across the board, but it also you can use a lot of these tools to kind of work within this four-step framework of building a visual brand as well. So, that being said, the last step well, the last part of step 4, I should say, is that feedback and iterate, um, step, and that's, like, going back to this idea of design does not happen in a vacuum, and it certainly doesn't happen in a clean line. Um, it's something that is very much like an evolution and a progression, if you will. So getting feedback helps to kind of identify areas where you're like, okay, this isn't resonating the right way. This isn't showing the visual vibe or getting the visual perception that I want it to. So iterating on that feedback leads to better outcomes in the long run, and it's always going to be an evolutionary process regardless. So don't be precious about seeking feedback. Definitely share around with your friends or your trusted group of creators who can give you an honest opinion on things, because that's going to help you get a fresh perspective on things. It's going to tell you where your weak points are. It's going to tell you where maybe something's not being visually communicated the right way, or the way that you think it's being communicated. And not only that, but you're gonna create content. You're gonna be designing content for your brand that better meets your audience's needs, where they're at by incorporating some of that feedback into overall as well. So, iteration is a big one. I know it's been over a year since we've designed any big branding activations for the sauce, and I'm still tweaking it. Almost every time I design something, I have a little something new to add. Consistency is always important, of course, so that's where going back to this idea of having a design style guide, a visual brand style guide, can help you make sure that you're playing within the right sandbox. You have your rules and parameters, but you can flex a little bit and get creative with it, and that's kind of the power and the beauty of it. So I think that's it, you guys. That is everything. That is my exact four-step process, although it's probably a lot longer than that in the long run. But if we're boiling it down to the bare essentials, that was my four-step process for what I do when I embark on a creative exploration journey to design and develop a visual brand strategy, for my clients, for myself, for the people that I work with. And again, just to reiterate, this was module 4 of a larger course that I'm doing all about called Design Like a Boss. Well, this is not the cover slide for the entire course, but this is one module of the course, but it's called Design Like a Boss: A Non-Designer's Guide to Visual Branding, and again, it's a 5-part deep dive course of everything that I've learned over the last decade working in creative agencies, brands, global brands, and also with creators and freelancers and solopreneurs, distilling all of that information down into the very simple, easy to digest, lessons that I've learned from that. So hopefully, this was helpful for you guys. Again, this is my first time ever live streaming on YouTube by myself. So hopefully I didn't, mess it up too bad, and hopefully this was really helpful and you guys got some good information. Don't forget that you can download the full deck of this, and I'm also gonna be I have two more things to add. I'm gonna be rolling out the full course in the next couple weeks. I have a wait list going for it right now, and if you join the wait list, you get 20% off of the initial pricing. So I have that on my Twitter. I will add it into the description on this, or you can DM me for it. I'm also looking for I'm in the process right now of curating a beta test group of folks who would be down to take this course, give me some feedback. Tell me this going back to feedback and iteration, you guys. Give me some feedback. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, if it resonated. So if you want to participate in this like beta group, I'm only looking for a couple people that can just kind of help me and work with me directly and providing some feedback, and hopefully it's valuable to you. So definitely let me know if that is something that you are interested in. Otherwise, definitely download this deck because I think it's helpful. I mean, you guys tell me. Thank you all so much for being here today. If anyone has any questions, you know where to find me. You can find me on Discord. You can find me on Twitter. Space Case K is my Twitter handle. You can find us over on Discord with the sauce. This is week 10 of our community building cohort. I'm so glad that I finally had an opportunity to talk about my areas of expertise and share a little bit about what I do. And more to come. I will put it that way. Life is fun, right? I agree, Linda. It is fun. It is fun. I feel like I need some, like, music or, like, some party vibes happening or something. That's what I always see the live streamers do on, like, YouTube and TikTok, right? Alright, you guys, I'm gonna close it down, but thank you so much for being here. This is gonna be on YouTube now for a little while at least. We might unlist it at some point. I'm not sure how we wanna play it, but we'll figure it out. So watch it while you can, download the deck while you can, and if you wanna be in this beta test group, let me know, and 20% off for signing up for the wait list. I hope you guys learned some stuff. I hope you enjoyed it. I will catch you all on the flip side. I'll be in Discord. Bye, guys.